Good afternoon, Rita.
Hi, Tusha. Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. We're just going to give people a few more minutes to roll in.
And I encourage everyone to use the chat at any time. If you have comments or questions.
Maybe we could even have people put in the chat an introduction. Who are you? Where are you coming from?
It's true. If you're up for that, I would love intros. Because later we're not doing intros. We're just going to talk about why we're here. And we'll give a couple more minutes and we'll go get started. I'm not used to being spotlighted.
Get used to it.
Yeah, Rita's a natural at this. She does this all the time.
No. Bet you all didn't expect this friendly banter back and forth as you're waiting for the event to start. Okay, shall we start, Tusha?
Yeah, we're 2 minutes in. Sounds good.
Okay. Yay, I see people are excited in the chat. Put all your excitement in there. Welcome everybody to our event Better Together. I want to start by doing a land acknowledgement that Tusha and I are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And the topic of allyship is really fitting today, especially as we think about how to move ourselves towards being more and more in allyship and backing the leadership of Indigenous leaders in this time. I am excited to be here. I thought I would speak from the heart right off the bat and say, Tusha and I have been planning this event for a couple of months. And for me, there's two reasons that I'm really excited about this event. One is that the strategic building of allyship is a part of every movement that I personally feel is neglected and doesn't get talked about enough. And so in this event, we're going to be talking about advancing women's inclusion in the workplace and in society more broadly. And I'm really excited to be featuring what it looks like for specifically men to be involved in that work and to strategically build that segment of the movement. And the second thing is that oftentimes we think about allyship as something that the person who's doing the allyship is doing it for the other person. But personally, I've grown so much as a leader and as an advocate and as a human, as I learn to really understand and pursue the work that allyship means. So I think that we all get to think about how we get to be involved in this work, and it's not just for the benefit of others, but that we actually get so much growth from it ourselves. So passing it to you, Tusha.
Yeah, so, for me, this is the second time we're doing this Better Together event. The first time we did it was back in 2019, I believe. And really what started is, personally, I know what it's like to be in rooms where I'm not represented and how much harder it is for me to get my voice heard when there are no allies in the room, And I had attended many women in tech events where incredible women were speaking on panels, and the audience was mostly women as well, which is great. As I've spoken about this before, I think those safe spaces are important. But for me, I was trying to figure out, how do we get a more balanced audience to come together to have these conversations? And because I didn't see many events at the time, I thought we'll just start one, and Pooja and I collaborated heavily on that initial event. So that's really what brought me here and what got me to start this. because I have benefited so much from the allies in my life, and I kind of want everyone to have what I have. And we'll talk more about that soon. So I think we're going to start by putting you all into breakout rooms. And I want all of you to discuss what brought you here, what are you excited about when it comes to this topic, and what gives you hope, and what are you hoping to get out of this event. So we'll go into breakout rooms for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back to start the panel.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. Hey.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I guess we need to just go around the room answering. Wow. Okay.
Sorry, I think some of you jumped in as the rooms were assigned, so you'll be moved right now.
Okay, well, can y'all hear me? I'll go first, I guess. Oops, wait, hold on.
I don't know if it's. There's a few people that have just joined, so we're just getting you all moved over to rooms right now. If you're still in the main one, you'll be bumped over shortly. Just bringing everyone back from the breakout rooms now.
I always love seeing who comes back from a breakout room first, because they're the people who are really proactive and click buttons as soon as they are presented to them.
Or they just wanted to leave that breakout room quickly for a
Gotta
reason.
go positive, Tusha.
Terrible way to start. I'll start over. Should we give it a minute, or is everyone back now?
No,
back?
everyone's back. And I'll remove myself off the spotlight. Turn it over to you, Tusha.
Yes, and if I could get the panelists spotlighted too, please, that would be Sue, Pooja, Oliver, and Andy. Hi, everyone. Welcome back from the breakout rooms. And we would love to hear some of what you discussed and some of your answers about what brought you here in the chat, if you're willing to write down some of those for us. And Rita will continue to monitor the chat and take any questions at the end. And we are going to get started. And first, I want to start with the panelists, because you've heard from me and Rita about why we're here. And I want to turn it over to the panelists to hear from them what brings them here to this event. So Sue, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great, thanks, Tusha. So like you, I'm here because I've benefited from allyship over my career as well. And it's funny, those things happen organically just through the relationships you build with people, but you end up having opportunities that if you did not have those relationships of meaning, those allies, you know, may not have been presented to you. And so I'm very grateful for the allies in my life and how my career is furthered from that. But in addition, I want to give back. So I'm here as an example of career progression through allyship. It doesn't take away from quality of work and performance. That has to be there as well. But I want to give back, and allyship is not just about men and women. It's about being an ally as well in every aspect of your life, and you can help people around you. So that's why I'm here.
Thanks, Sue. Oliver, I'll pass over to you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm here because I spend a lot of my time, probably most of my time, trying to build really strong and world-class teams. It's what I've done all my life. And part of that is having a really diverse set of views and people and life experiences within that team. I found, and I think research totally supports it, that the more diverse the team you have, the stronger the discussion will be, the points of view and the decisions that you make are. And the proximate cause of then why I'm here is that a few years ago, I was trying to hire Tusha. And she has now, I think I'm on the third time she's turned me down now to working with me. But instead, she just makes me come here. But I'm very excited to be here and talk more about how we can all build diverse teams together.
You just join me instead. That's how that'll go.
Yeah, that's what she says every time.
I'll pass over to you, Pooja, if you could tell us about what brings you here.
Yeah, I think it's similar to what you and Sue said. You know, I'm very grateful for the allies in my life, and I think the best way to show my gratitude is to pay it forward. And what better way than to share the lessons that I've learned from them. And it's really an opportunity to learn from others as well, right? My amazing co-panelists and those of you here in the audience today showing up to support us and engage in a conversation that helps us all learn from each other on what's working, what's not working in other organizations, right? And whenever I feel a little bit of self-doubt, whether I have enough to contribute or not, you know, I hear Tusha in my head as one of my strongest allies, reminding me how passionate I'm about this, how much effort I put in and how much I've learned. And I hope to share some of that with you today.
Thanks, Pooja. It's the same. It's definitely both ways very much. I think we give each other courage often. Andy, passing over to you.
Hello. Yeah, why am I here? Tusha made me come, probably like all of you on the panel, as she does. Apart from that, though, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to learning more, and hopefully I have some experiences that I can share and some of the things that I've learned over the years, you know, in terms of working with Tusha and just also just, building my teams at Magnet.
Thanks. We're going to get to our questions very soon, but first we're going to share a video with all of you that will give us a good definition of allyship, and then we will start the panel right after that.
We're not getting any sound, Sam.
There is no sound.
No, the sound didn't come through.
Okay, one more.
While we wait, I'm going to read the chat to see if what folks shared about what brings them here.
You may have heard of allyship, but research shows that most of us don't really understand what allyship is. So let's start with the definition. Allyship is an active and consistent effort to use your privilege and power to support and advocate for people with less privilege. Let's unpack that. Our society is set up in ways that prioritizes some groups over others. For example, a restaurant might be easy to navigate for a person without a disability, but much harder for someone who uses a wheelchair. These patterns show up in our workplaces too. Studies show that leaders are more likely to mentor people who remind them of themselves. And since most leaders are white men, that means it's often easier for white men to find mentors.
Allyship involves understanding inequities like these and taking concrete steps to help level the playing field. This is a key point. To show up as allies, we have to take action. Sometimes taking action feels tricky or even uncomfortable, but not acting can be more harmful than we realize. It can send a signal that we're not aware of the injustices around us, or that we think they're okay, or even that we don't care. So if you're not sure what to do, ask yourself, is there an action I can take that is responsible, even if it's not perfect? If so, do that. Allyship isn't about getting any one action perfectly right. It's about acting consistently in ways that add up over time. This is another key point. Allyship is consistent. We might be moved to practice allyship toward a specific group when injustice is in the news, but to really make a difference, we need to commit to pushing for change over the long term. Now, let's look at the last piece of the definition. Allyship is about supporting and advocating for people with less privilege. That might mean speaking up when you see inequity, like pointing out that the women on your team are often interrupted in meetings. It could also mean working proactively to make things fairer. For example, you could research best practices.
I just got a note from Sam that her computer automatically restarted.
Oh no. I think that the video is almost near the end anyway, so we can get started.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let Sam know that not to rush, we're doing okay. So yeah, from that video, I think one of the first points that we want to talk about is that a lot of this effort goes to leveling the playing field, because as you know, or as you might have heard, I think our intersectionalities means all of us have different experiences throughout our lives, throughout our careers, and it is something I've become more and more aware of it as I learn more about others' experience, others who are different from me. So really what I want to talk to the panelists about is the level playing field, and ways that it hasn't been. And so Pooja, I'm going to turn it over to you, because I would love to hear from you about where you might have experienced this, or what your experience is around the level playing field.
Thanks, Tisha. Yeah, I think as a woman of color in leadership and technology, you know, I've often focused on how I've been a minority. You know, when I was the only woman student in some of my engineering classes, when I progressed through my career to higher levels of leadership and saw the number of women around me keep dropping, right? But I realized it was so easy for me to look from that lens. The other side of it was the incredible family support I have. So fun fact, I come from a part of India that's actually matrilineal. So what that means is women have always been the head of the family. So I grew up seeing strong women. Being the only women student in an engineering class could never put a dent on that type of confidence, right? That you get with that upbringing. So, you know, and as the war in Ukraine shakes all of us, I think of how I grew up in a safe, conflict-free environment with access to education, access to healthcare, all things we take for granted. So earlier this week, actually, I wrote an article on a friend and colleague whom I deeply admire. Her access to higher education was constrained by war, and yet she persevered. She finally realized her dreams in Canada to become an aerospace engineer, and she did that while having 3 kids during university. So when I sit at the same table as her today, I know that the paths we took to get to the same place were not the same. She brings a rich, diverse experience that we could all learn from, but we as allies have to help her see that because she would rather not talk about it. You know, I wrote the article because she didn't want to. But I wanted her story to be shared because I think she's a role model that we can all be inspired by. So it's really up to us to ask and listen to those journeys so we can be more in tune. So that's one example.
It's a great example. I think you should share that article with all of us if you have that handy.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Put it in the chat, please, if you can.
Will do.
Yeah. Andy, I'll pass over to you. I'm curious to hear your experiences with bias for yourself or from others that you've witnessed.
Yeah, so yeah, I have one story to share. You know, this kind of goes back about, you know, say 15 years or so. I was visiting my mom in Toronto, and she was, you know, in her, you know, sort of mid 60s or so at the time. And you know, just fast forwarding ahead, you know, she's still kicking, and the end of the story, you might be a little bit of a roller coaster, but it all ends well. So yeah, I mean, we were visiting, but something seemed off. You know, she was having trouble answering questions. She was really tired. You know, usually my mom's up at the crack of dawn and, you know, has breakfast before I'm even up, that kind of thing, right? And she was still in bed. She was like lethargic. Okay, something's wrong. We're going to take her to the hospital, even though she was, you know, kind of pushing back on that a little bit, but we took her to the hospital. And as they were triaging, you know, and it should be noted, like, she worked at this hospital for 30 years as a nurse. So she had just retired a few years prior. And yeah, so they were trying to ask her questions, and, you know, because something was going on, she was not answering. So they just looked to me and said, well, can you translate this for me? You know, like, you know, can you tell her we want to know this, we want to know that? It's like, hold on, like, first of all, I don't speak Korean, and second of all, like, she worked here for 30 years. Like, she should be able, like, this is something we should be looking at. So just, you know, that sort of because of, you know, the way she looks and their assumptions that they made, you know, in terms of the story that they're telling themselves, right, led to us waiting longer. Luckily, everything, you know, we managed to see the doctor in time to make everything better. And if there's time at the end, I can tell you about the whole story. But anyway, that's kind of, you know, one instance where, you know, where we're kind of impacted in that way.
Yeah, and you were saying, like, you know, they didn't even diagnose her. The fact that her clarity of speech wasn't there was an actual condition, but they didn't diagnose that accurately either, just because of the assumptions that they had made.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would have been one of the major symptoms that they overlooked, and they just thought, you know, she's tired. That was basically the only symptom, but maybe having that loss of cognitive function could have had her seen sooner and luckily it turned out well, but it could have alternatively like turned out much worse, you know.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Sue, I'll pass over to you. I'm curious to hear about your experience around the playing field not being level.
Yeah, so I've been in tech for 25 years, and my first management boardroom experience was in 1999, I'm going to say, might have been 2000. And there must have been somewhere between 17 to 20 people around the management table doing the QBR. And I was one of only 2 women at the table. Now, back in 1999, that may not seem too surprising, but the reason I know that the playing field isn't level today, remains unlevel, is that I'm still often the only woman in the room or one of 2 women in the room. So I think we know that STEM graduates are women graduating STEM programs is increasing exponentially, and it's going to take time for women to advance on, in terms of numbers that way. But I think there's a problem. We're not that the representation in the boardroom at increasing levels of management seniority is not keeping pace with the contribution that women are making in the workplace. And so, is it better? It's definitely better, but is it? We should have seen a compounded impact in terms of representation by 2022. And the fact that I still see myself sometimes as the only woman in the room or one of 2 or 3 potentially means that we have a lot of work to do still.
I agree. And I think, when you add women of color, I think experience that exponentially as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, as an example, I was at an event, I won't even put a timeline on it, but I was in a senior management position role, and someone entered the room who didn't know it was me, and I kind of got passed by. Literally, the person walked by me, and then somebody introduced them to me, and they're like, "Oh, oh, that's who you are, right?" So the visual association with me and an executive position was not. It didn't click for that individual. So those are the kind of things that women of color, people that are differently abled have to deal with. People, some people, not all people, because we all have allies, and we know that that's not true in all cases. But people can make assumptions based on what they see before kind of taking a moment to understand who is in front of them.
I've definitely experienced that myself at many events. Oliver, I'll pass over to you about your experience with when did you realize, or was there a point when you realized that the playing field is not level for everybody?
Yeah, because I mean, I will, all of your assumptions about me are probably correct. So, I've been on the other end of the uneven playing field. And so for me, I was really starting to think about this, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And for whatever reason in the engineering world, I just reversed the problem and started working from the conclusion backwards. And so I said, well, okay, let's assume we have a meritocracy and everything is fair and equal and the world is great, as some people would claim. But if you then work backwards from that assumption, and you look at the result of what we have, certainly within engineering, which is, far fewer women in engineering than are represented in the general population at large, and going into engineering, then there's sort of this unfortunate, terrible and inescapable conclusion that if we have a meritocracy, then women must be worse at engineering. And I just don't, that's just untrue, right? I sort of refuse to believe that fact. And so that for me really clicked in my head. And I remember it took me a few days to really come to terms with it. And I think that was really the beginning of where I started to get involved and really understand that the playing field was not level. It went far beyond women into racialized groups, LGBTQ community, all sorts of other diverse communities. And if it's not level, then we need to try and do something about it. And it's even more important for us to take actions to try and build a diverse point of view on any team to make that team stronger, and to do some sort of, unnatural things to try and make that happen.
Yeah, and if you look at the data from like high schools, when it comes to maths and sciences, they often talk about how it's pretty evenly split. I think girls are score slightly higher when it comes to these courses, certainly. So, when you're trying to unpack, like, why don't we get more women going into these fields? Certainly, you can't make a case that men are better at engineering, for sure, if you look at all the stats out there.
And to go with Sue's point, right? Like the data also shows that women are better leaders, and yet we have so few in leadership positions, right? And so, it can't be a level playing field if that's the case.
There's no loss of opportunity here. This is a thing that kind of you want to scream from the mountaintops, is that businesses only get better through inclusion and diversity. They only get better. There's no loss portion of that equation. Anyway, I'll stop.
No, I mean, it's very true. And I mean, I find it, so, I in engineering, I see a number of people when we do start, a number of people who look like me, who sometimes feel that these efforts are going to somehow take away from something that they may have. And I always, referred back to it as like, the engineering world is exploding, continuing to grow more and more. It's not like there's a limited number of jobs that we're all fighting over those 3 jobs, right? There's no engineering company, certainly in North America, probably in most of the world, that can get enough talent.
Yeah.
So how are we not doing everything we can to get everybody included into that pool?
And might I add, if we actually increase diversity and inclusion, we will actually add more jobs to the economy. So
absolutely.
And keep the people that you have, reduces attrition as well. Looking at the time, I'm going to move us over to the next question that I very much want to get to, which is what allyship means. I would love to hear from all of you about what does allyship mean to you. Can you share some examples with us? So Pooja, I'm going to start with you. If you want to tell us a bit about, what has it meant to you, and can you share some examples?
yeah, for sure. I think, and it's kind of building on the discussion on the playing field not being level, because, I gave some examples earlier, but it, for me personally, became really apparent when I became a mom last year. So when I was pregnant, I had a carefully thought out plan on how I would juggle everything so well. I planned to only take a bit of time off work. My husband took majority of the parental leave, and I thought between him and me, we had this gender equity thing all sorted out, right? We were good. And then I gave birth, and that's where, I didn't plan for the fact that I would have health complications and a tough recovery. I also didn't plan for the fact that if you're breastfeeding, only the mom can do that. So I obviously knew nothing about having kids, but that's when it really hit me. Like, who was I kidding? I couldn't have it all, right? Even if I tried. But here's the thing, even with all the challenges, I actually did have almost all. Of course, there were some compromises, and the caveat is that I've been really lucky, and this is not true for all. But the reason I was able to do that is because I had some phenomenal allies at work. So starting with my CEO, he gave me incredible support and flexibility. And between him, my peers, my team, they didn't just step in for me when I needed them to. See, that would have been easy. But what they did was more impactful. They went out of their way to make sure that they actually included me by accommodating me, right? So they adjusted to my schedules. And that's what made me feel like a very valued part of the organization. So one example is we had this leadership offsite meeting in person, and I told my CEO I'd be late for the morning session because I had to feed my son. And I said, start without me. But when I showed up, they had waited. So to them, it was just 15, 20 minutes, right? But he said they waited because it was important to have me there. And for me, that was a huge deal. As an ally, he reinforced the value of my voice. And that's really the takeaway here, right? For me, it's, you know, whenever I've had a strong ally, they've taken the time to tell me why my voice is important, then taken action to accommodate me so that my voice can be heard. And after hearing what I have to say, send me a note or message to reinforce how valuable my voice is. And believe me, that goes a long way.
It really does. I think the difference there being, you know, they could have started without you. And, you know, that might be like some step where, you know, if they still welcome you, but they started, but by them waiting, you know, that's really the biggest signal to show that like your input is so valuable to this conversation that we're going to make time to wait for you. I think that's great. Thank you for sharing. Sue, I'll pass over to you. I want to hear about what allyship means to you and how you practice it.
So I think allyship is a state of being. It is selfless. So one shouldn't think about allyship in terms of the gain that one is going to get from it. There will be gain from it, but it shouldn't be the reason you decide you're going to practice allyship. So I think it goes beyond work. It goes absolutely everywhere in your life. And so I'll give you kind of like a human, non-work related example. I was at Farm Boy a couple of weeks ago and just doing my groceries, and there was this quite older, like she must have been in her late 80s, like older Black woman. And she was walking around with her with a cutout of what was on sale at Farm Boy, I guess that week, or the specials. And she walked around the whole time. And I noticed, but then I went about doing my groceries, and we ended up at the cash register around there at the same time. I paid for my stuff, and I noticed that she walked out and she didn't buy anything. And I just felt like, I don't know her situation. I don't want to approach her, but I do. So I ended up approaching her, but I said, you know, I just was conversational, and I said, his food prices are just going through the roof, you know, aren't they? And so we had a little chat about that. And I just said, you know, are you okay? She said, yes, I'm okay, thank you. She said, thank you. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's tough to reach out to people you don't know, but I think we have to do that in every aspect of our lives. And, you know, you shouldn't be assumptive and sort of somebody looks like they might be in need, so you go and you buy them something. You don't know what their situation is. But to me, allyship is paying attention and being aware of your surroundings, whether it's work or home, doesn't really matter. And if you can do something to make a difference in somebody's life, even if it's just connecting with them, just like let them be heard or felt, even just felt, that's what allyship is to me.
Yeah, and you know, that's an incredible example. Thank you. And I think, you know, the difference is that you could have bought her. You know, I know you wanted to help. Like I've been in that situation. You could have just gone and like offered to buy her something. But I love how you approach that conversation with questions and just talking to her so that she gets to keep her dignity and you get to support her in the way that she wants to be supported.
Yeah.
You know, because I think sometimes there's an instinct where you might want to go in as a savior. You know, they talk about this in allyship, and there's a way you can approach it where you're really trying to figure out how does this person need to be supported, you know, because you don't want to make assumptions.
Yeah, it's dangerous to make assumptions. You're trying to be available, but not be prescriptive, right?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to turn over to Andy and Oliver. Andy, I'll start with you. Andy's been an ally to me for a very long time. You know, he's been in rooms. When he's in the room, it has given me more courage to share my input, to give my opinion. He's also been the one to push whenever I was changing jobs. He would, you know, say, Tusha, I negotiated, so you should too. So, you know, his input has directly contributed to my salary being higher at certain positions. And he's also been the one to call me out when I'm not taking the advice that I give to other women. He would be like, how are you having these doubts? These are the things you coach other women about. So that's the kind of ally he's been to me, but I want to turn it over to him to hear his perspective on, how we got to this point that we are in our friendship.
Oh, friendship. Well, I'm glad I recently got upgraded to friendship. So that was a accomplishment of mine. Just a little joke. So yeah, Tusha and I mean, we've shared the bulk of our career together, starting out as peers, this is like over 20 years ago now. But yeah, I think as we grew and as we experienced things together, things that happen when you're at all these different companies with, whether it's layoffs or those kinds of things, we went through those things together. I think we developed, a lot of trust with each other. And definitely, Tusha, you've been consistently, advocating for my career, even if as peers or as my leader, and I'm happy that I was able to, advocate for you and get you to advocate for yourself. And yeah, I think the impact of this relationship that we've had, when we were building up teams early on, is that we had that sort of comfort in meetings and discussions to kind of call each other out, like to disagree in front of each other, right? And to kind of, like some team members maybe at the beginning were kind of taken aback and like, oh, what's going on there? This is kind of a weird.
They commented about our dynamic.
Yeah,
because we were the two most senior leaders in the office, and yeah, they were taken aback.
But I think it kind of normalized it, right? Kind of normalized, hey, like we can call each other out, we can disagree. Oftentimes, we would realize, oh yeah, you're right. Like having that conversation and normalizing, have that conversation and seeing that, hey, everything's okay. Maybe encourage other team members to express themselves that way as well. So that was really, it was amazing to reflect on that and then kind of link it back to our allyship for each other.
Yeah, like we had some serious disagreements quite publicly in front of the team, and it wasn't intentionally then, but now I think it's actually good for leaders to be intentional about that, publicly be allies for each other, because I think we set great examples of how we disagree. We come from, we're very different the way we, approach a problem, but I think they saw how we changed each other's perspectives, and how we respected each other at the end of the day. But we had pretty loud disagreements very publicly, but it created that environment for everyone in the office to kind of do the same for each other. Which I thought was incredible. I'll turn over to Oliver. Oliver and I haven't worked together, as he mentioned.
I keep trying.
But he's been an incredible ally to me, and we were trying to figure out what made that happen. How did I get to trust him so quickly? So I want to pass over to Oliver to hear his take on that.
Yeah, we were talking about it the other day, and Tusha said, I don't know why I trusted you so quickly. And I said it's my charming, youthful looks and appearance, but she said, no, that's not it. So that was our first big disagreement. But I said I did have a pretty good idea why it was, and it's something I do fairly intentionally. Is I just talk about it. I talk about even in a big risky situation like a formal job interview. If I'm talking to a racialized person or a woman, I will just, towards the point where I'm thinking, yeah, I think we should hire this person. I'll actually say, so, hey, you're a racialized woman in technology. How's that experience been? Right? Because one of the things I've really come to learn is that the only people who aren't actually openly talking about the uneven playing field and the experiences that they've been having are generally speaking the white men, right? If you're white, you're not talking about race. You're the only ones not talking about race. You know, if you're a man, you're not talking about gender inequality. All the women are, all the racialized people are. So, but that can be very scary. And somehow I've just managed to just be willing to talk about it because, hey, if everybody else is talking about it, I should too, if we're going to do something. And I think that builds a strong level of I don't know, man, I mean, it depends what I say, but I think it helps to get to the trust level of I'm actually involved in thinking about this, even in contexts where it's not obvious, or where the standard thing is to not do that. So yeah, it is a technique that I do during interviews, which, you know, I'm sure our corporate lawyer is cringing every time they hear that I do this, because it's not something you're supposed to. But I think it's actually important to do so. And in other contexts as well, right? Just acknowledge the fact of what's going on. And you know, like Sue said, right? It's really sort of an invitation to be like, hey, I can be here, without really saying that. But, you know, what do you want to talk about in that context?
I just want to say, Oliver, like, it's huge that you do that, and the other men that we all work with that do that. And you may not know it, but the amount of breathing room you give individuals when you do that, I can guarantee you that their body is just, they're releasing a whole level of anxiety that they may be carrying with entering a new workplace, and are they going to have opportunities, and what walls are going to come up just by you asking that question so early on. Their defenses and maybe some, you know, voices in their head that they may worry about, those things will fall down. So it's massively important that you do that. So I just want to say thank you on behalf of the racialized and other people that come into your organization. That's a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had a bad experience with it, right? It's always produced like a really interesting conversation. We haven't always ended up working together as a result of it, but you know, it's just taught me so much as well, because you just get whole different perspectives from people.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's definitely what made me more comfortable with you right away, because I knew he was comfortable talking about these topics with me, things that really mattered to me. Like, so when I needed his advice on like building a diverse team, I could just openly talk to him about my experiences, my team's experiences, because you're right. You know, I think talking about race is very normal to me. Talking about gender is very normal to me. And I think allies need to get comfortable speaking about those. And Oliver, you mentioned, you know, how it's been a journey, you know, how much you learned during like the Black Lives Matter movement, and you got more comfortable talking about race at that time. I don't know if you had anything to add aside from that. But, yeah.
I mean, it's intensely scary when you know, the first time you're doing this, which is ridiculous, because you know, I am not the person in the relationship who should be scared. But it is intensely scary to take a step to go into some territory where, you know, it can be dangerous. But it's important to do so. And it started out with me just talking to engineers who were women about this. And I will say it's probably only in the past, you know, 2 years that I have gotten much more comfortable talking about race in the same sort of way. And that's, you know, probably because of some ingrained biases within me. But, you know, it's important to recognize them. And I'm now pretty good, but I still know, I absolutely know this. I can hear it. I don't know if other people can hear it, but I can hear it, that before I say the word black, there's a tiny little pause, right? But, you know, I think it's important to just force through that, and it's, you know, gets easier and more important to keep doing that sort of thing, for me and for other people who I'm, you know, having conversations with.
Yeah, I think for everybody in the audience to know that and that's our next topic anyway, which I'll get to, is to know that it's going to be uncomfortable and it's a journey. You know, as you start, you get into it and you'll learn and you'll grow and, you know, start talking about having more and more of these conversations that might be uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, my
okay.
advice to everyone who wants to be an ally and wants to learn how to talk about it, because I will say I'm still learning, is just put yourself in with a group of you know, people who are different than you and listen to what they're saying, and then say one thing once, and then do it again, say two things, do it again, three things, and you see where the pattern's going. And you can get more comfortable at it.
I'm sure you all have lots to add to each other as well, but I was wrong about how long we would take. Rita said, Rita's like, you're not going to have much time left, and I'm aware of the time and how much we have to cover. So, you know, the next part is actually about the discomfort, because we wanted to acknowledge that it's not easy work. Being an ally is not easy work, you know, and we've already covered some of it. You know, so Oliver, I don't know if you have any more to touch on this. Like, is there anything that makes you nervous or uncomfortable aside from what we've already discussed?
What a leading question, Tusha. It's almost like we planned out what we were going to talk about. So there is an additional aspect that I personally find, which is sometimes in some of the leadership circles that I'm working in, I have started to take on this what for me is a very bizarre role, bizarre in the history of my life, which is I seem to be the radical. I'm the person who's like advocating for change and like picking up a picket sign or something crazy like that. Sorry, I'm trying to work out the word crazy for my so I'm just calling that out. So or something extreme like that. And so that for me is a very new experience in my life, and one that I am not yet comfortable with. But it's an interesting thing, and I will say in the past few days I have since we talked about it, Tusha, I have actually leaned into it and become even more radical in a couple of contexts about a few more things with actually stupendous results. So it's I am, you know, it's a bizarre thing, but I think it's a great opportunity for my personal development, since I'm, you know, mostly interested in myself, but my personal development, but then also helping others around me as well. So I encourage, you know, people to just speak up and say what you believe, and even if it's a little bit scary and you might be alone at first, at least.
So just a thought on the topic of this discussion today is better together, and I just want to focus on the together piece. Like, I think especially those of us that are in more managerial leadership positions, we should be, and I can, even in my current world that I have right now at BDO, I have multiple allies, and we have very direct conversations, and we create the safe space for them to be able to share their ideas and their thoughts and have conversations. So I think for everybody on the call today, if you can reach out to your peers, your white male peers, and people that you feel like you can initiate a dialogue, maybe there's some type of initiative you can do together. Like, if you give them a safe space where they can nervously trot through whatever they're thinking, but can't get out, you know, like, be there to catch them when they fall. Like, we want them to be there for us. Like, I do think it is better together is a perfect positioning for this, because we do have a role to play as well.
Yeah, I agree. Pooja, I'll pass over to you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'll build on what Sue just said, right? So one of the practices I've taken is I actually talk to an ally before I go into a meeting. I tell them I need you to be an ally, right? And it kind of gives them some time to prep for it. You know, we're in the same headspace, so I encourage others to do that as well. But like Oliver said, you know, you use the word radical and so on, right? And that's the issue. It's nervous, it's awkward because there still aren't enough people doing it, right? And that's kind of what makes it so awkward. But I think the other part of it is, you know, allyship is different based on the person or the individual that you're being an ally to, right? Different people need different things. So I think the important part there is that and the video talked about that, right? There's no perfect way to do it. And nobody, like, no matter how much of an expert you get at it, how much experience you build, you may not know what to do, right? So for me, what I've really embraced is that sometimes when I have to think on the spot, I'm not quick enough for it. And I don't know what to say. And that's okay, right? I'm scared. Am I going to offend someone? Am I, we talk about pulling people into the conversation, but maybe one of them really doesn't want to be pulled in at that moment, right? So should I still do it? And for me, so that's kind of what I realized, is that it's okay. It's okay for me to accept that I don't know what to do in the moment, but what you can change is after, right? Take the time to think about it and go back to that person or the team. Ask them, what do you think I should have said? What would have helped you, right? It's okay to co-create with the person you're being an ally for, and that's how you can both learn, right? So I think for me, that's the important part, is that don't put all that pressure on yourself. You can learn from it and go after that. And then the other part, I think Sue, in your example earlier, you talked about that, right? Sometimes when we think about allies, we're like, okay, we got to be the hero and stand up for other people, but that's not what it is. So I've made many mistakes, right? And that's what I've learned the most from is, I had a junior engineer on my team who I felt was being picked on in a meeting. And so I immediately rushed to her defense, right? And then when I talked to her about it after, she said, actually, I would have preferred to handle it on my own. What you could have said is, hey, I sense some tension in the room. How is this landing with you? And given her that opportunity to speak up and kind of created that environment of that we're listening, right? So for me, that was huge. I learned so much from that, but that comes back to my first point, right? Every person, there's individual needs for allyship. So it's recognizing that and embracing the fact that you are going to make mistakes, but still trying.
Yeah, I think the discomfort of being wrong sometimes too, and making mistakes as you learn and grow together, that's uncomfortable too. But there's so much, I think, I know, like 4 years ago, I was not the ally I am today, and I will continue to grow as I learn from everyone about how I can be an ally to them as an individual. Andy, you and I have, had many conversations about this early on when we were, starting in office together. Do you want to touch on what you found uncomfortable?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we've definitely, a lot of the things I've been hearing are resonating. I know that there was an interview that I'm thinking of kind of early on where we were trying to, we're doing lots of interviewing for the office, and we had just done a technical interview for a female candidate. And it was kind of like, we're kind of on the fence and debating, and ultimately, our answer was that, well, I think she would require a lot of support, to onboard, maybe more than we could handle. And then you asked, well, do you think you would say that if it was a male candidate? And I'm really happy that you felt comfortable to ask that question and not, it was something that I'm happy, I didn't take defensively. I took it as, well, I don't know. I think I said at the time, well, I don't know. I have to think about it, and just kind of reflecting and trying to see if there was some unconscious bias there, right? And if that discomfort, right, of kind of identifying that unconscious bias and making it more conscious, right? It's going to be difficult, but I think it's definitely valuable to have these kinds of conversations. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think our allyship helped make it easier for me to bring it up too, because that's not something I can always bring up, but it is one of my favorite questions to ask when it's like in performance reviews or technical assessment, any kind of assessment, anytime you're giving constructive feedback. Just because I've seen how it's done differently, I like to kind of pause and think, would I say this the same way if I were saying this to a man? And it kind of helps me be aware of my own biases for sure.
And I think we also, like, the conversation also happened like just sort of out in the cubes. It wasn't like so it was again another example where, you know, I think we kind of, you know, we're kind of encouraging or setting this example for everyone.
Right. It wasn't behind the closed door. I just openly asked, and where everybody could hear, so that they know we have these conversations. Yeah, Sue, I don't know if I know you kind of picked up on it already. I don't know if you have anything more to add to that topic. Otherwise, we can go to the next one.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now I know we've talked about what we've done, you know, as individuals, how we can be allies for each other. I kind of want to go beyond the individual allyship to talk about how do we create a culture of allyship, you know, at our company. How do we multiply and amplify these voices? And I, you know, because I think we have a lot of senior leaders here and senior leaders in the audience as well. So I want to ask all of you to talk about, you know, the changes that you've seen in your organizations with the work that you've done. Yeah, I think Andy, you know, we talked about how openly we disagreed and created that culture. I would love to hear from you a couple of examples that highlight, you know, the kind of culture that you've had at the workplace.
Yeah, I think, you know, as I spoke about, you know, having these kinds of disagreements, I think it has enabled, you know, the team members to feel like that we have their back, you know, like they feel supported. So, you know, like one of the things we were doing, you know, when we interview candidates, we try to, you know, have maybe a male interviewer and a female interviewer do the technical assessment. And one of the things,
I'll look into it. Flair seems to be that
sorry. One of the things that we like to ask, you know, if they put a problem up and, you know, even if it doesn't have any, a solution up, I mean, you know, even if it doesn't have any issues, you know, the interviewers will still kind of just ask the questions like, are you sure that does what you think it does? Just to sort of like, just to see, because we want to build that culture of being able to challenge each other and respond well to it. So in this example, you know, the female interviewer asked the male candidate this question, and then, you know, he was quite, you know, he reacted quite big and, you know, kind of snapped at her in that situation. And it wasn't, I don't think it was as, you know, it wasn't picked up by the male interviewer, but, you know, we created this, first of all, having the question to exercise that. And, you know, his solution was fine. Technically, it was, if everything else considered, we probably would have proceeded, but seeing that, creating the environment where, you know, the interviewer felt comfortable to bring this up, and knowing that, you know, we'd have her back, you know, is kind of what, you know, where the culture that we built up, you know, when we were building the team.
Yeah, because I was there during this time, and really, you know, I think the male interviewers didn't pick up. I think he raised his voice towards her and it made her uncomfortable, you know, and when it comes to creating that culture, it's not enough to put a diverse set of interviewers in the panel. They have to feel comfortable enough, like you have to have this environment where afterwards, each one of their inputs is taken seriously and considered, you know, because the candidate passed the interview, the technical portion of the interview, but he raised his voice that made her feel uncomfortable, and that's a no, you know, and so to create that environment where that is a no, you know, and and she felt comfortable. She knew that she'd be supported when she brought it up after the interview. She knew she'd be supported, she'd be heard. And it's like one example, but really, I think everything we did in that environment, yeah, knowing that you'd be believed, like we just said, that when you bring it up, that when you felt uncomfortable, you know, that she knew we'd believe her. We weren't, it wasn't a question, and that was a no. And that's kind of something we practiced pretty much with everything we did in that office. Yeah, and Oliver, I want to hear from you about, the work you've done at your company to get more people to be allies with you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I think when we first discussed it, I said, I don't know how to make a culture. I don't know how to make a culture of anything. Never mind what I want it to be. If I aim for thing A, I'll probably end up on thing B the best. So I sort of stand by that answer. But I do see, cultures being made up of all of the individuals within the organization that's building it, right? It's not like some third party thing that comes from the ceiling or piped in through the air vents or anything. And so I think it's just critically important to think about and be meaningful and purposeful about the people and the types of people that you're bringing into the company and how you want them to behave. I have an example from a number of years ago where I was interviewing somebody who was going to be, for a leadership position within our engineering organization. And he used the phrase, I believe it was lady engineers, which I thought was, wow, that's weird. So there was nothing really wrong anywhere else within in the interview. So we finished the interview, and I went off, and I sat down and I said, okay, we're gonna get. I had a young racialized woman who was an engineering manager on the team, and she's not afraid of anything. So I said, I need you to go interview this person, please. So she went off, and she came back and said, oh, seemed fine. Yeah, like him. Let's hire him. And I said, then I recounted this part to her, and she was like, that sometimes happens. And I still didn't like the answer, right? Like literally, this is like what 2 or 3 words that this person said, and we didn't hire them simply because of those 2 or 3 words. I don't know what I can't, it is, I give them the benefit of the doubt. It is just 2 or 3 words, but what we put into our company, even 2 or 3 words and into the culture, is going to affect it. So be really thoughtful about it. And I will say that, my times of being the radical, I saw someone in the chat called passionate instead of radical. I like that. It sounds so much better. Being the passionate advocate for things right over time, as Sue has talked about, has paid off. And there's, there are times now where I am not the most passionate radical person in the group, where I have people who are in the conversation and are acting as allies to me, which is amazing as we go do these sorts of things. So it's been, I still don't know, like I can't put down like a 12-step program to fix our culture or anything. I think it's just a set of small changes that you do over time.
I mean, I think at the level that you are, at the highest level, like you talked about how you used to be the only person bringing these things up, and you've grown more people into these rooms to be with you, and that makes it easier for you to bring up these conversations, so you've just like brought up more people to be allies with you, which makes your life easier to bring up. I
spent 4 years getting my closest ally into the room with me, and it's been a huge life-changing experience for me, at least.
I thought I was your closest ally.
Well, you're not in the room, so it's going to take 5 years, I guess, for you.
I'm gonna pass over to Sue.
So I think the first thing I would say is that no company is there yet in terms of a culture of allyship. Like every single company, it's a work in progress. And it's just important that you actually make progress. I think there's a few things in the stories that were just told that one thing that BDO is incredibly good at is taking care of people. Like they do not tolerate improper treatment of people, regardless of who you are. And I've seen the machine work in such amazing ways to protect people, but to understand the situation and try to manage it. So I think that there's a layer of taking care of individual people, humanness in them, that should apply regardless. But then when it comes to allyship, it's got to be like action oriented. Don't just talk about it, but what are you actually doing to make it a part of how you operate day to day? So one of the things that happens in the environment in which I work is we literally look at our teams. If we have a hiring need, we look at the team and how it's configured today. Like, what's our gender representation? What's our visible minority representation, our diversity representation on that team? And again, you can never sacrifice quality, you know, whatever the ground floor is on skills and experience and all those things, all things being equal, what can we do to advance gender equality and diversity? All things being equal. So we have those conversations on a daily basis. It's active at all levels of the organization. We have not nailed it, but I think, you know, when I said at the beginning, I've been in tech for a long time, and the representation at the senior management level hasn't evolved that much. Where I am seeing massive evolution is the conversations that are happening and the commitment to actually institutionalize getting better. And so I think it's on all of us as leaders on both sides of the coin to make sure we don't lose momentum on this, right? Like it's got to become real in how we do our work every single day, and that's what's going to make the difference.
I know you've talked about a lot of the men in senior leadership at your company who are great allies to you, who are often looking at the room and creating space to make sure that you're comfortable sharing your input when you're underrepresented in the meetings that you have.
Yeah.
Sounds like
so,
great.
So I think you know, maybe it's because I have been doing this for 25 years, and you know, I don't know what it is, and I'm, you know, at the point where you know, I'm very comfortable just speaking openly with anybody. It doesn't really matter who they are. There's always context, and you have to, you know, relationship building and nuances and all of those good things, but never shying away from the conversation is really important, because even if 10% of what you talk about is retained and makes an impact, that's the seed you've planted that's going to foster other good things, right? So yeah, I think we all collectively have to do everything we can, but certainly white men in positions of power have the most impact, will have the most impact in the shortest amount of time in moving the needles on these things. So.
Okay, Pooja, I'll pass over to you to hear about the incredible work you've done at gas talks to create this culture of allyship.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, like everyone said, it definitely starts with leadership. But we've also, you know, through the initiatives we have at Gas Stops, we really try to understand what can we do or say to resonate with more people to kind of build that momentum, right? And what we found as a common theme is people want to make a change and people want to be allies. And I think I saw this in the chat somewhere, you know, people believe they're good, right? And how do we build on that? And what we found is that they really struggle with what can they do in terms of action at the individual level. And, you know, they think being an ally is something unachievable, right? So that's where we had some good success by highlighting stories from a diverse set of people across the organization on what allyship means to them. And they shared their own examples of what an ally has done for them. And there were, you know, countless beautiful examples, but what it really showed was that sometimes the actions, you know, they seem really small to the individual who is being an ally, but it has immense impact, right? So it really highlighted that being an ally is not something that's hard to reach, that unachievable goal. It's something many of us already do. So, but it's about recognizing the impact and then purposefully applying it. So that's really how we can build that culture of allyship. So we found that it changed the needle for people who thought they had nothing to contribute to diversity and inclusion. You know, we were kind of positively reinforcing, encouraging them that they were already contributing. It's how do you build upon that? And that's how, you know, you can get that domino effect that spreads more organically.
I remember one of the things that stuck with me that you said when you first started this, they were all coming to you to ask for your ideas of what to do. And then now you're at a point where you've got lots of these men in leadership positions who are coming to you with ideas. You know, and yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, that was the real turning point because, you know, at the start, as a senior women leader in the organization, the only one actually, I think it felt it had to be me who took the initiative, right? And don't get me wrong, I care deeply about this, but I also think my male colleagues didn't know where to start. I think they were looking to me for direction and ideas. So initially it was raise awareness, like explain to them the challenges that they never noticed. But as that awareness grew, they started, right? They were amplifying my voice, showing up to support me. But that true turning point was, as you said, Tusha, they came to me with their own ideas, right? And they wanted to contribute. So, this week with International Women's Day, one of our male leaders developed guidelines for inclusive meetings. Another recently did a whole lot of research on this, women's network and association that's in our industry. He did all the work to get us to join. And then when it came time to send out the email to the company, he said, you do it, right? It's better coming from you. And I said, no, actually, it's much more powerful coming from you because it shows how much you have invested in advancing our diversity initiatives. And I think for me, that's, those are some examples of that turning point.
Those are great examples. Thanks for sharing. And I have Rita messaging me because I know we're coming up against the clock. Rita, do we have time for breakout rooms? I know you've all been listening for so long. We figured you probably have things to say. So we were thinking about sending you into breakout rooms. Should we do that now?
Yeah, let's do a quick 3 or 4 minutes and then we'll come back for a Q&A. So think of the juicy questions you have. And I think the prompt is just talk about any sort of highlights of what the panelists shared or something that you learned or didn't notice before. We'll do that now. See you in 3 minutes.
Sorry, I accidentally left the breakout room.
Hi, welcome back. Oh, if you could spotlight Rita too. I don't want to be the only one up here. Perfect.
We'll spotlight the rest of the.
Yeah, I think we have time for like one question, maybe max of two. I don't know if we have anything from the chat, Rita. Does anybody have any questions for the panelists?
We had a lot of comments in the chat, but I don't think we had questions. Nobody has questions about allyship, or nobody wants to hear these wonderful panelists speak anymore.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this was originally prompted by, I think, something Oliver said, but I'm curious to hear other folks' thoughts about it too, which is, and actually something you said in the chat, Rita, which is that when you were speaking about the success you've had, sort of like asking people openly about their experiences with their identity, like in the world of tech, or like, what has your experience as a woman been like, or what has your experience, whatever. I feel like for me, some of the fear or risk around some of those kinds of questions comes from like, it feels like I don't want to convey the message that it's just like, oh, you're the woman on the team. You know what I mean? I'd like to balance that against the other question of like, would I ask a man, like, what has your experience as a man been like in tech? Like, probably not. Although maybe I should, I don't know. So I'm curious if you could expand on that point a bit, or like how, if you felt that tension or how you work with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question to ask. I think of it as the reason that I want to get a diverse team is so that we have a diverse set of backgrounds in the team and experiences and points of view. And so I do ask that form of what essentially everyone I'm interviewing, I'm asking about their background and their point of view and their unique experiences. And so there's just one, thing here where I happen to be asking, about a woman's point of view or a racialized person's point of view. And I will say I do go a little bit further, and I, usually put in because like, so can you tell me about, so I can't help but notice you're, a woman in engineering, and I know that, many, that can many times be challenging. And I want you to know that like, I totally value building a diverse team and would love to hear about how we could go about doing that together to help our team grow more diverse. So there's ways to get into it where you're also expressing a little bit of a point of view of like, hey, I'm not here to, say bad things about it. And if anybody wants to chat with me, especially the white men out there who want to do anything scary like this, feel free to. You probably all know Tusha. She can connect us. You can find me on LinkedIn. Would happy to chat about some of the experiences I've had doing this sort of thing, and play it out even. How might it go? But I will say, like, I've never had a I've never had it go wrong, at least not that I know of.
And I bring it up for sure. Yeah. We have a DEI portion of our interview. So if I am talking to someone who's coming from a underrepresented group, I definitely bring it up. I don't know if it's more comfortable for me to do so, Mark, but I bring it up and kind of call it out saying, how has that been for you? Because really what I'm trying to get to is to highlight the inclusive environment we try to create. Yes. Now I know we're running against time, and we want to bring Mike in for a closing word.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I would like to actually start by just thanking all the panelists. That was a very, very good panel discussion, and always an opportunity to listen and learn, which I think is an important element of allyship just to begin with. I took a couple of notes down that I thought I'd share back from what I heard. So the first is, I do see allyship as being that step function if you really want to make change. It's hard to drive the change you want for diversity, equity, and inclusion unless you are willing to lean into it and not look at it as a series of events, but something you're prepared to commit time to. Do it thoughtfully, carefully, deliberately, and not try to tick a box around, we had an event today and it was about diversity and we're done. We can move back to our normal program. It's just not going to work. I liked actually, Sue, how you put it. You said there's no loss in doing so. I mean, if you look at a pure business point of view, there's only upside here. That there is only upside here by giving everyone the opportunity to be included and hearing from them. It just makes things better. And so there's really no downside here. I also heard this idea of allyship being this idea of creating space for others who would otherwise be sidelined actually in the process, where you miss real opportunities to have a far better outcome, regardless of whatever the topic is that you're into. So I thought that was a good component that I was hearing in a couple of parts of the discussion. The other part was this idea of listening, learning, but also developing the comfort to speak. And I thought, Oliver, you did a great job of framing that. It's not comfortable. Like I've been on with Tusha, our Female Founders Women-Owned Business Subcommittee now for about 3.5 years. I'm still trying to figure out how to get comfortable with the conversation now, having been in regular conversations on it and learning and listening. It's been helpful. And I do want to commend Tusha for always having a voice. You can have a soft voice some days, but whenever you speak, I listen, because every time you speak, it's substantive. And it really helps me to understand what I should be doing. And I do value that deeply. I also liked Pooja's comment just around this idea of prearranging meeting allies. I thought that was both sneaky and smart. So I appreciated that one a lot. The other thing, there was a bit of a round robin on this idea of culture and allyship together. And I know from being somebody who's been in leadership roles, I'm the white male around the table that has been in different leadership roles for a really long time. And the tone that you provide matters, but it can't just be talk. You actually have to act. You have to do things that are real. You have to have an attitude towards helping your organization to learn. If you have a sense of trust across the organization, you can actually create change. So I think if you're going to drive education on this topic and you don't have an environment where people can be a bit vulnerable in practicing, kind of back to Oliver's point, you're not going to have any change, because people won't be comfortable in being practitioners. They're going to go through the training, the jello will wiggle around on the table for a while and it'll go back to its original form and nothing will be accomplished. So you do have to create an environment where people are prepared to take some of those steps and get a little bit vulnerable with it and be prepared to be in the conversation, not tiptoe around the topics. So I think that's really important. And I did want to close off just by thanking Tusha and Rita. It takes a lot of time and effort to put together a program like today. I know many hours were put into preparing for today. And it's that notion I said earlier at the top of my comments around, taking the time, the care, the thoughtfulness in really thinking about this topic. And we certainly have seen that as part of today's panel discussion. So thank you for that. And thanks for including me in today's activity too. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And I didn't even introduce him properly for those of you who didn't read the chat. Mike's the CEO at Invest Ottawa, who partnered with me in putting this event together. It's been an incredible support. And Mike and I have worked together for a very long time, and he's a great ally, for everyone in Ottawa for sure. And always, when it comes to creating inclusive environments and events that Invest Ottawa often creates for the Ottawa community. Anyway, I know we're out of time. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you so much to the panelists for agreeing to join this conversation and for the incredible work you do in your organizations and in our community. And I hope we continue this conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tisha.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.